All right. So the market environment, of course, it's something that's not as controlled compared to the micro environment for a business or for any type of business. And with that, what you have with the market environment are four main components. We have the consumers, we have the competitors, we have the distributors, and we have the suppliers. And each component has a major role to play within the market environment. So the consumers, of course, these are the people that actually buy your products. They're the ones that determine how your product should look like, what price your product should be. Again, with the 5 P's that I mentioned, the promotional strategy or the promotional mix strategy you're going to adapt, the distribution channels that you're going to use, and then the personnel in terms of what kind of personnel in terms of how you're going to put them together towards achieving or selling the product at the end of the day. Now, with that, your consumers, of course, how to determine your consumers is to understand how the market is and understand the dynamics of the market from outside in terms of the macro environment. That means maybe like the trends that are taking place, how the culture is, and how that dictates what people accept and what they don't accept. Now, again, understanding your consumers then goes a long way for you to be able to know what to put in place in terms of that. Now, of course, sometimes some businesses have more than one target customer in terms of the consumers. Again, there are different factors that can determine if they would have one or a few target customers. So just giving you a good example, though I'm going to go to foreign products. So for like example, you would have products like Johnson & Johnson. Whereby they first started off. So Johnson & Johnson, I'm sure most of you know Johnson & Johnson is basically like a beauty care line. But I'm sure most of you know it's more based on or primarily based on kids or babies. And that's basically how they started off. But if you notice nowadays, they have started, looking at other ranges in terms of men and women. And what that does is that, and that's what we actually call diversification strategy. But what that does is that it then breaks down who your target customers are going to be. They're not just going to be, the babies or the mommies, or so it's you have different ranges, and with the different ranges, automatically that means you're going to have different target customers. So you have to then be able to identify the characteristics of each target customer, know who's the primary person that buys the product. So for example, for the Johnson & Johnson for babies, of course, it's not the babies that are going to buy the product, but is the mommies. So if you notice with any Johnson & Johnson advertisement, it will always be focused on what's important to the mom and not necessarily what's important to the baby, because the baby doesn't know how to talk, doesn't understand or comprehend. So understanding that, it goes a long way in you being able to understand the complexity of who you're trying to target and then how to get them to buy your product at the end of the day. So again, it's about how the product looks. So of course, even with the product ranges, again, in Johnson comparing men to women, you'd see different colors. So the women's more neutral white colors, feminine colors. You see the men is strong masculine blue colors. So all that is put into who the target customers are, and knowing your consumers goes a long way in providing that. Now, with that, you have the competitors. Now, of course, the competitors are those who you are competing within the industry in which you find yourself. And again, understanding who your competitors are, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, and what their capabilities are, goes a long way also for you to be able to position yourself in the market and know what you need to do to get ahead of the game. Of course, we see this a lot with mobile in the mobile industry in terms of those selling, the Apple iPhone, the Samsung. You see how they're always back to back trying to compete. Of course, we know, or though it's always an argument between the Samsung lovers and the Apple lovers, but you tend to see how there's always a back and forth and which one is the best or which one is better. But with that, what I'm getting at is that at the end of the day, this competition is never ending. And why that is so is because you always have to be aware of who your competitors are, and always be ahead of the game of what they're doing and what they're trying to employ in terms of strategy and tactics towards trying to be ahead, so that you can also try and do the same or be ahead of the game also. So of course, before I could remember when BlackBerry was basically, the number one mobile phone in the industry, but then one day woke up and it was Apple, or it was even Samsung or Nokia. Sorry, we even forgot Nokia as another important phone there, and how it has gone or dwindled down. Now again, it's lack of being aware of the competition, and then understanding that you always have to re-strategize and always put yourself ahead of the game with your competition. But you can only do that if you're analyzing your environment, and that's the whole point of this: analyzing your consumers, analyzing your competition, and then knowing what you need to do to be ahead of the game. Then you have the distributors. Now here, of course, you're looking at the distribution channels that exist within the industry, again, that you find yourself. But then I think it's also important that we have to understand that there's innovation, with technology, innovation becomes much more feasible. So what I mean by that is that you see now people are coming with new ways of innovation when it comes to distribution, in terms of supplying and distribution. So distribution channels play a major role depending on what product you're trying to sell and who your end customers are and where they are. But knowing that you have different means of distributing your products and understanding there are different ways in which you can do that, whether it's to the wholesalers or directly to the retailers. There are some companies that decide they're going to cut the middleman in terms of the distribution channel and go straight to the retailers. There are some that know that they can't do without the middleman, which is the wholesalers, and it has to go through them to get their products across the board. So again, it just depends. And then there's some that are more into exclusivity, whereby they don't even distribute to anybody. You have to buy directly from them because of the exclusivity. And these are high-end customers that usually prefer things like that. So again, it depends on who your customer, it goes back to who your customers are, that really then determines how that distribution channel is going to look like. Then but understanding the dynamics of that market in terms of the industry goes a long way in helping you to know what is doable and what is not doable. Then of course you have the suppliers, and the suppliers are those that actually provide you with the raw materials that you need to actually produce, but where to get them, how to get them, how much the cost is, the implication cost of that, then how readily available the supply of these raw materials is essential towards the sustainability of the business. So for example, you see organizations or businesses like Dangote that when you talk about the cement, for example, tend to look for places where limestones are actually available, understanding that they have to then build their industry or their plant within that area to then cut off that's a supply chain that then would then increase their cost. So for example, recently, or sorry, not too recently, but Dangote a few years back invested his sugar plant in Nasarawa State. So I'm from Nasarawa State. He invested his sugar plant, and basically they're basically producing the sugar there, sugar cane there. And so he bought the field and of course the sugar plant in itself, and basically they're supplying it direct, just next to each other, and that saves a lot of cost. You can imagine if he was far, or if the plant was much far away from where the sugar cane farm is, then that would render another cost in terms of that. So always trying to reduce cost, whether it's from the distribution channel or the supply, is essential towards strategizing. But again, understanding the market, and that's why even it doesn't matter which business you're doing, even before you enter a business, is essential you're able to understand these components and understand the dynamics of these components before you enter into a market, to then understand the viability and ability of you being successful within that industry. Okay, so with that, we're going to go to the next video, which we're going to look at the macro environment.